What if I told you that the son who called me a useless old man just watched his cousin walk away with $1 million inheritance that was supposed to be his? That the same boy who mocked my gray hair and told me I was too old to understand the modern world just learned the hardest lesson of his life? My name is James, I'm 64 years old, and this is the story of how respect, family bonds, and the choices we make when we think nobody's watching can change everything. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, I share real stories from real people, stories about family, life lessons, and the moments that change us forever. Before we dive into today's story, please hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up if it resonates with you, and don't forget to share it with someone who might need to hear this message. And hey, I'd love to know where you're all watching from. Drop a comment below telling me your city or country. I read every single comment and will personally say hello to as many of you as I can. Your support means the world to me. Now, let me tell you about the most painful and ultimately eye-opening experience of my life. 6 months ago, I thought I had it all figured out. I was James Mitchell, a 64-year-old retired contractor who'd built a successful business from the ground up. My hands were weathered from decades of honest work, my back ached from years of lifting and building, but I was proud. I'd created something that would last, or so I thought. I lived in a modest 2-story house in suburban Ohio, the same house where I'd raised my son Marcus after my wife Sarah passed away 12 years ago. Cancer took her when Marcus was only 15, and I'd done my best to be both mother and father to him. Maybe that was my first mistake, trying to be everything to a boy who needed to learn how to be a man. Marcus was now 27, fresh out of business school with an MBA and an attitude that could cut glass. He'd moved back home 6 months earlier, claiming he needed time to strategize his next move and build his network. What he really meant was that he needed a free place to live while he figured out how to get rich quick without getting his hands dirty. The changes in him had been gradual at first. The boy who used to help me in the garage, who'd hand me tools and listen to my stories about building our family business, had been replaced by someone I barely recognized. Designer clothes, expensive haircuts, and a smartphone that never left his hand. He spoke in business jargon and looked at me like I was a relic from a bygone era. But it was the little things that hurt the most. The way he'd roll his eyes when I'd share stories about the old days. How he'd cut me off mid-sentence to take a call about some opportunity or networking event. The way he'd shake his head when I'd suggest we work on a project together, saying, "Dad, that's not how things work anymore." My nephew Danny was the complete opposite. At 25, he was 2 years younger than Marcus but seemed decades more mature. Danny lived about an hour away and worked as a high school teacher and coach. His salary wasn't impressive by today's standards, but he had something Marcus had lost: respect for family, for hard work, and for the people who came before him. Danny would visit every few weeks, usually on Sundays. He'd help me with yard work, we'd share a beer on the porch, and he'd actually listen when I talked. He never made me feel like my opinions were outdated or my experiences worthless. When Danny looked at me, he saw wisdom earned through years of struggle and success. When Marcus looked at me, he saw an obstacle to his ambitions. The contrast became painfully clear during one particular Sunday dinner. I'd invited both boys over, something I tried to do monthly to keep our family connected. Marcus showed up late, as usual, checking his phone throughout the meal. Danny helped me cook and set the table. "Uncle James," Danny said, passing the mashed potatoes, "I've been thinking about that story you told me about starting your business with just a truck and a toolbox. I shared it with my students during our unit on entrepreneurship. They were fascinated." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. Those were different times, Danny. People respected hard work back then. Marcus looked up from his phone, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. "Different times is right, Dad. You can't build a business today with a truck and some tools. That's industrial age thinking. We're in the information age now, it's all about digital presence, scalability, and disruption." "Disruption of what?" I asked, genuinely trying to understand my son's world. Of outdated business models, Dad. No offense, but hammering nails and fixing things isn't going to create generational wealth. That's blue-collar thinking. The words hit me like a physical blow. Blue-collar thinking. As if the work that had put food on his table, paid for his education, and built the very roof over his head was somehow beneath him now. Danny set down his fork, his jaw tightening. Marcus, your dad built something real. He employed people, solved problems, and created value in his community. That's not outdated, that's foundational. Marcus laughed, actually laughed. Danny, you're a teacher. With all due respect, you wouldn't understand the complexity of modern business strategy. Dad's generation had it easy. You could make a living with just effort back then. Now you need innovation, disruption, and a global mindset. I had it easy. The words came out harsher than I intended. Son, I worked 16-hour days for the first 10 years of my business. I missed dinners, I missed your baseball games, I put everything on the line to build something that would support our family. Easy. Marcus sighed, the sound dripping with condescension. I'm not saying you didn't work hard, Dad. I'm saying the world has changed. Your way of doing things is obsolete. You can't just work harder anymore, you have to work smarter. And how exactly are you working smarter? Danny asked, his voice carefully controlled. I'm building networks, creating strategic partnerships, identifying market inefficiencies. It's about leverage and scalability, not just manual labor. That sounds like a lot of fancy words for sitting on your phone all day, I said, immediately regretting the harshness. Marcus's face flushed red. You know what, Dad? This is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't see past your own generation. The world moved on, and you got left behind. Maybe it's time you accepted that. The silence that followed was deafening. Danny stared at Marcus in disbelief. I felt something break inside my chest, not just hurt, but a fundamental shift in how I saw my son. Maybe you're right, I said quietly. Maybe I am just an old man who doesn't understand the modern world. I stood up and began clearing the dishes. Marcus went back to his phone. Danny helped me clean up, and we worked in silence for several minutes before he spoke. Uncle James, he said softly, don't let him make you doubt yourself. What you built, what you taught me about integrity and hard work, that will never be obsolete. I nodded, but the damage was done. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and wondered when my son had stopped seeing me as his father and started seeing me as an embarrassment. The weeks that followed that dinner were a slow burn of humiliation. Marcus seemed to take my moment of doubt as permission to openly treat me like a burden. What had been subtle disrespect became blatant contempt, and I found myself walking on eggshells in my own home. It started with small things. Marcus would invite his friends over without asking, treating our house like his personal headquarters. They were all cut from the same cloth, young men in expensive clothes talking about cryptocurrency, startup opportunities, and passive income streams. They'd sit around my kitchen table, laptops open, speaking in acronyms and buzzwords I didn't understand. My dad's from the old school, I heard Marcus tell one of them. He still thinks you have to physically build something to create value. It's actually kind of charming in a nostalgic way. Charming. Nostalgic. Like I was a museum piece. The worst part was how they'd talk around me when I was in the room, as if I wasn't there or couldn't understand their conversation. They'd discuss disrupting traditional industries and monetizing inefficiencies, while I made them coffee and brought them snacks like some kind of elderly servant. One evening, I was in the garage working on restoring an old rocking chair that had belonged to Sarah's grandmother. It was delicate work. The kind that required patience, skill, and an understanding of how wood moves and ages. I'd been at it for hours, carefully sanding down decades of wear to reveal the beautiful grain underneath. Marcus and two of his friends wandered in, probably looking for something in the storage area. They stopped when they saw me hunched over the chair with my sandpaper and tools. "What are you doing, Dad?" Marcus asked, though his tone suggested he wasn't really interested in the answer. "Restoring this chair for the living room," I said, not looking up from my work. "Your grandmother Sarah loved this piece. Her grandmother made it with her husband back in 1943. One of Marcus's friends, a kid named Brad with gel in his hair and a watch that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, let out a small laugh. "Dude, you can get a new rocking chair on Amazon for like $50. Why spend all that time on something so old?" I felt my jaw clench, but I kept working. Because this chair has history. It has meaning. Some things are worth preserving. But is it scalable? Brad asked, and his friends snickered. "I mean, what's your hourly rate on that project? Time is money, right?" Marcus joined in the laughter. Dad's never worried about efficiency. He's from the generation that thinks harder is better, even when it doesn't make sense. I stopped sanding and looked up at my son. "Marcus, this chair will be here long after those Amazon chairs fall apart. It's about quality, craftsmanship, and respecting the past." "The past," Marcus repeated, shaking his head. "Dad, that's your problem right there. You're so focused on the past that you can't see the future. While you're sitting here playing with old furniture, the world is moving on without you." "Playing?" The word came out like a growl. "Son, I built everything you see around you with these hands. This playing paid for your education, your clothes, your fancy business school. And I'm grateful for that, Dad. But gratitude doesn't mean I have to repeat your mistakes. I'm building something bigger than a small-town construction business. I'm thinking global, digital, scalable." Brad nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. Physical labor is so 20th century. The real money is in ideas, innovation, disruption." "Disruption," I repeated, testing the word on my tongue. "And what exactly are you planning to disrupt?" Marcus exchanged a look with his friends that made my stomach turn. It was the look adults give each other when a child asks a question they're too young to understand. "Dad, you wouldn't get it. It's complex. It involves market analysis, consumer psychology, and leveraging technology platforms. It's not manual labor." The way he said, manual labor, made it sound like a disease. That night, after Marcus and his friends had disappeared to whatever networking event or startup gathering they attended, I sat alone in my garage staring at the half-restored rocking chair. Sarah's chair. I could almost see her sitting in it, rocking our baby Marcus to sleep, singing him lullabies in the soft light of evening. What would she think of the man our son had become? Would she be proud of his education, his ambition? Or would she be heartbroken, like I was, to see how little he valued the sacrifices we'd made for him? I picked up my sandpaper and got back to work. Some things were worth preserving, regardless of what the modern world thought about efficiency and scalability. 3 days later, the humiliation reached a new low. I was at the hardware store, Murphy's Hardware, a place I'd been shopping for 30 years. Old Joe Murphy had sold it to his son-in-law a few years back, but it still felt like home. I was picking up some supplies for a small job I'd taken on, helping Mrs. Patterson down the street fix her front porch. She was 78 and lived on a fixed income, so I was doing it at cost, just to help out. I was examining deck screws when I heard familiar laughter from the next aisle over. Marcus was there with Brad and another friend, apparently buying something for one of their projects. "I'm telling you guys," Marcus was saying, "the old man is completely out of touch. You should see him in his garage, spending hours on some ancient chair that's probably worth $10. It's actually sad." "Maybe he's getting dementia," Brad suggested, and they all laughed. My hands tightened around the box of screws I was holding. "Nah, he's just old school," Marcus continued. "He can't adapt. He's stuck in this mindset where physical work equals value. It's like trying to explain the internet to a caveman. My grandfather's the same way, the third friend chimed in. They just can't wrap their heads around how money really works now. They think you have to sweat for every dollar. Exactly. Marcus's voice was getting louder, more animated. My dad built this little construction business and thinks he's some kind of mogul. He doesn't understand that he's been thinking small his entire life. No vision, no scaling potential, no exit strategy. Just him and his tools, fixing one thing at a time like it's still 1985. I stood there, frozen, as my son dissected my life's work for the entertainment of his friends. Every sacrifice, every late night, every missed meal reduced to the ramblings of an outdated old man who couldn't adapt to the modern world. The best part, Marcus continued, and I could hear the grin in his voice, is that he actually thinks he's teaching me something valuable. Like his little lessons about hard work and integrity are going to help me build wealth. It's adorable, really. Adorable. My life lessons were adorable. I quietly put the screws back on the shelf and walked out of the store without buying anything. I sat in my truck in the parking lot for 20 minutes, staring at my hands on the steering wheel. These hands that had built houses, fixed problems, and provided for my family. These hands that Marcus found so embarrassingly outdated. When I got home, Marcus was in the kitchen making himself a sandwich. "Hey Dad," he said casually, not looking up from his food. "I'm going out tonight. Some investors are interested in the app idea I've been developing." "What kind of app?" I asked, genuinely trying to show interest in his life. He paused, mayo-covered knife in hand, and gave me that look again. "Dad, it's complicated. It's about leveraging social algorithms to create viral content streams that can be monetized through multiple revenue channels. You wouldn't really understand the technical aspects." "Try me," I said. Marcus sighed. "Okay, imagine if you could predict what videos people want to watch before they know they want to watch them, and then create content that captures their attention and directs it toward products they're likely to buy. It's like advertising, but native and algorithmic." I nodded slowly. "So, you're trying to trick people into buying things?" "It's not tricking, Dad. It's sophisticated marketing. It's the future of commerce. And these investors, they're going to give you money to build this? If I can convince them I understand the market dynamics and have a viable user acquisition strategy." I stared at my son, this stranger in expensive clothes who spoke in riddles and looked at me like I was stupid. "Marcus, what happened to you? When did you become someone who talks about people like their problems to be solved?" His face hardened. "When I realized that the world doesn't owe you anything just because you work hard, Dad. When I learned that success is about innovation and intelligence, not just showing up and following orders." Following orders? I felt my temper rising. "Son, I never followed orders in my life. I built something from nothing. I created jobs, I solved problems, You did manual labor for 40 years, Marcus interrupted. "That's not the same as building a business. That's just, surviving." The word hung in the air between us like a slap. Surviving. Everything I'd accomplished, everything I'd sacrificed, reduced to mere survival. "Get out," I said quietly. "What?" "Get out of my kitchen. Go to your investor meeting. Go build your app that tricks people into buying things. But get out of my sight." Marcus stared at me for a moment, then shook his head with that same condescending smile. "See? This is what I mean. You can't handle modern complexity. Everything is black and white with your generation." He grabbed his sandwich and walked out, leaving me standing alone in the kitchen where I'd made him thousands of meals, where I'd helped him with homework, where I'd held him when he cried about missing his mother. That night, I called my brother Robert. Robert was 2 years older than me, a retired teacher who'd never married but had been like a second father to both Marcus and Danny after Sarah died. "Robert," I said when he picked up, "I think I'm losing my son." "What's going on, James?" I told him everything, the dinner, the hardware store, the constant disrespect and condescension. Robert listened without interrupting, the way he always did. "James," he said when I finished, "you remember what Dad used to say about respect? Our father had been a World War II veteran, a man of few words but deep principles. Respect is earned through actions, not demanded through words." "Yeah," I said. "But Robert, I feel like I'm watching Marcus become someone I don't recognize. Someone I don't even like." "Maybe it's time he learned what respect really means," Robert said quietly. "And maybe it's time you stopped enabling his disrespect." I knew he was right, but I didn't know how to fix it. Marcus was my son, my only child, the last piece of Sarah I had left in this world. How do you teach a 27-year-old man lessons he should have learned as a boy? 2 weeks later, I got my answer in the most unexpected way possible. The call came on a Tuesday morning in March. I was in the garage, finally putting the finishing touches on Sarah's grandmother's rocking chair, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a law firm in Cincinnati, Hoffman, Baker and Associates. "Mr. Mitchell. This is Patricia Hoffman. I'm calling regarding the estate of your great-aunt Margaret." I nearly dropped my sandpaper. Great-aunt Margaret. I hadn't thought about her in years, though I should have. She was my grandmother's sister, a woman who'd lived to be 97 and had outlived most of her generation. I'd met her only a handful of times at family reunions when I was young. "I'm sorry," I said, setting down my tools. "Aunt Margaret passed away last month, Mr. Mitchell. I apologize for the delay in contacting you. Her estate was complex. She was quite wealthy, and there were several international assets that required time to catalog." Wealthy? The Margaret I remembered was a quiet woman who lived simply and spoke little. She'd never married, never had children, and had spent most of her life working as a bookkeeper for various businesses. "I'm calling because you and your family have been named in her will." My heart stopped. "Named how?" Mrs. Margaret specified that her estate should go to family members who, and I quote, "understand the value of hard work, respect their elders, and show kindness to others without expectation of reward." She left detailed instructions for how these qualities should be assessed. I sank into an old chair I kept in the garage. "How much are we talking about?" "The estate is valued at approximately $2.8 million. The number hit me like a physical force. $2.8 million. I'd worked my entire life and never dreamed of seeing that kind of money. "Mr. Mitchell. Are you there?" "I'm here," I managed. I'm in shock. "I understand. Now, there are conditions." Mrs. Margaret was very specific about who should receive what portions of the inheritance. She included detailed character assessments based on her observations during family gatherings over the years, as well as reports from family members she trusted. Reports. Apparently, she maintained correspondence with several family members and asked them to keep her informed about the character and actions of the younger generation. She wanted to ensure her money went to people who would use it wisely and honor the values she held dear. I thought about this woman I barely knew, quietly watching our family from the sidelines, taking notes on who we'd become and what we'd chosen to value. She divided the inheritance into 3 parts, Patricia continued. The largest portion, $1.8 million, goes to the family member under 30 who best exemplifies respect, kindness, and genuine care for others. A smaller portion of $800,000 goes to the older family member who has sacrificed the most for their family while maintaining their integrity. And $200,000 is set aside for family members who need financial assistance and have proven themselves worthy of trust. My mind raced. Marcus and Danny were the only family members under 30. And the way she'd worded it, respect, kindness, and genuine care for others, it sounded like she'd been paying attention to things I thought no one noticed. How do we determine who meets these criteria? I asked. That's where it gets interesting. Mrs. Margaret appointed an executor, someone she trusted to make these determinations based on her written guidelines and their own observations. Someone who knew the family well enough to make fair judgments. Who? Your brother Robert. I nearly dropped the phone. Robert. Who'd had dinner with us dozens of times over the years. Who'd watched Marcus's transformation from respectful son to entitled young man. Who'd seen Danny's consistent kindness and genuine character. Robert has been observing the family for the past several years on Mrs. Margaret's behalf, Patricia continued. He's been asked to make his determination within the next month and notify us of his decision. After I hung up, I sat in the garage for a long time, staring at the completed rocking chair. The wood gleamed with a rich, warm finish that brought out every detail of the grain. It had taken me weeks of patient work, but it was beautiful now, better than it had been when it was new. I thought about Margaret, watching our family from afar, seeing things that maybe we couldn't see ourselves because we were too close to the situation. I thought about Robert, carrying this secret knowledge, watching his nephew's behavior with new eyes. And I thought about Marcus, upstairs in his room, probably on another call about his app idea, completely unaware that his attitude toward his family might cost him more money than he'd ever dreamed of having. I didn't tell Marcus about the inheritance that night. Or the next day. Or the day after that. Something held me back, maybe curiosity about how he'd behave if he didn't know there was money at stake. Maybe a test of his character that I hoped he'd pass. But as the days went by, his behavior only got worse. The breaking point came the following Sunday. Danny had come over to help me install a new water heater, a job that would have cost Mrs. Patterson $300 if she'd hired a professional. We were in the basement, wrestling with pipes and fittings, when Marcus appeared at the top of the stairs. Dad, I need to talk to you about something important. I'm a little busy right now, son. Can it wait? It's about your financial future. I've been thinking, and I really believe you should sell the house and downsize. Maybe move into one of those senior communities. Danny and I exchanged glances. I wiped my hands on a rag and looked up at my son. Why would I do that? Because you're not getting any younger, Dad. This house is too big for one person, and the maintenance costs are going to become a burden. If you sell now, you could invest the proceeds and actually build some wealth for your retirement. Marcus, Danny said carefully, your dad loves this house. This is where you grew up, where your mom. Danny, with respect, this isn't really your business, Marcus interrupted. I'm trying to look out for my father's best interests. His best interests, or yours. Danny's voice had an edge I'd rarely heard. Marcus's face flushed. What's that supposed to mean? It means maybe you should think about why you're suddenly so concerned about your dad's living situation. Maybe I'm concerned because I'm the one who'll have to take care of him when he gets too old to manage on his own. Maybe I'm thinking ahead while everyone else is living in denial about reality. The words hit me like cold water. Take care of him. Like I was already a burden he was planning for. Marcus, I said, my voice barely controlled, I'm 64, not 94. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself and this house. For now, Marcus said. But Dad, you have to be realistic. You're already showing signs of slowing down. The way you obsess over old furniture, your resistance to technology, your inability to understand modern business concepts. These are all indicators. Indicators of what? Of cognitive decline. It's normal at your age, Dad. Nothing to be ashamed of. But it's exactly why you need to make smart financial decisions now, while you still can. The garage fell completely silent except for the distant hum of the water heater we'd been installing. Danny's wrench clattered to the floor. Did you just? Danny started, his voice shaking with anger. I'm trying to help, Marcus said defensively. Someone has to think practically about these things. I stood up slowly, my knees creaking in a way that suddenly seemed to validate everything my son had just said. But my mind was crystal clear, clearer than it had been in months. "Marcus," I said quietly, "get out of my basement." "Dad, I'm trying to." "Get out of my basement, out of my house, and don't come back until you remember that I'm your father, not your burden." Marcus stared at me for a moment, then shook his head with that familiar disappointed expression. "See? This is exactly what I mean. You can't have a rational conversation about difficult topics. Everything is emotional with you." He turned and walked upstairs, leaving Danny and me alone with the unfinished plumbing and the weight of his words. "Uncle James," Danny said softly, "I'm so sorry. I can't believe he—" "It's not your fault, Danny. And you know what? Maybe he's right. Maybe I am just a confused old man who doesn't understand the modern world." Danny turned to face me fully, his young face serious and determined. "Uncle James, look at me. You are one of the smartest, most capable men I've ever known. You built a business, raised a son alone, and have helped more people in this community than Marcus will probably help in his entire life. Don't let his arrogance make you doubt yourself." I looked at this young man, Sarah's brother's boy, who'd somehow grown up to be everything I'd hoped Marcus would become, and felt something shift inside me. That night, I called Robert. "The inheritance," I said without preamble. "How much do you think Marcus knows about it?" "Nothing, as far as I know." Margaret was very clear that no one should be told until after I'd made my determination. "Why?" I told him about the conversation in the basement, about Marcus's suggestion that I was showing signs of cognitive decline, about his plan for me to sell the house and move into a senior community. Robert was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was tired. "James, I've been watching both boys for years now, like Margaret asked me to. I've seen how Danny treats you, how he values family and works with kids who have nothing. And I've seen how Marcus treats you, how he talks about you when he thinks no one important is listening. And my decision is already made. Has been for months, really. I was just hoping Marcus might surprise me, might show some growth or maturity before I had to make it official." "What's your decision?" "Danny gets the 1.8 million. You get the 800,000. Marcus gets nothing." The finality in Robert's voice should have made me happy, should have felt like justice. Instead, it just made me sad. "Robert, he's my son. And you're his father. Look how he's treated you." Margaret specifically stated that the money should go to people who show respect for their elders. Marcus has shown the opposite. What if I talk to him? What if I give him a chance to? "James," Robert interrupted gently, Margaret also left a letter. Specific instructions about what should happen if family members tried to change the terms after learning about the inheritance. She was a smart woman. She knew how money changes people. I closed my eyes, thinking about Sarah, about the dreams we'd had for our son, about the man we'd hoped he'd become. When do we tell them? Next week. Margaret's wishes were clear. The announcement should be made at a family gathering, in front of witnesses, so there could be no confusion or misunderstanding. As I hung up the phone, I realized that I was about to watch my son learn the hardest lesson of his life. And despite everything he'd said and done, my heart was already breaking for him. The week leading up to Robert's announcement felt like waiting for a storm that everyone could sense but no one could see. I went through the motions of my daily routine, morning coffee, reading the paper, small projects around the house, but everything felt different, charged with anticipation and dread. Marcus seemed to sense something was changing, though he couldn't put his finger on what. He'd been unusually attentive that week, asking if I needed help with anything, commenting positively on the restored rocking chair, even offering to cook dinner one evening. It was like he was trying to make up for something without admitting he'd done anything wrong. "Dad," he said one morning, finding me on the front porch with my coffee, "I've been thinking about what you said. About respect and family values." I looked at him over my newspaper. He was dressed more casually than usual, jeans and a plain t-shirt instead of his typical business attire. His hair wasn't perfectly styled, and he looked younger, more like the boy I remembered. What about it? Maybe I've been too focused on my career goals. Maybe I haven't been appreciating what I have right here. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd heard from him in months, and part of me wanted to grab onto it, to believe that my son was finding his way back to the values Sarah and I had tried to instill in him. Marcus, I just want you to understand that experience has value. That the people who came before you might actually have something worth learning from. He nodded earnestly. You're right, Dad. I've been thinking about maybe working with you on some projects. Learning the business from the ground up. Maybe there's something to be said for traditional approaches. The timing of his sudden change of heart wasn't lost on me. Marcus was smart enough to sense when the wind was shifting, even if he didn't know why. But was this genuine growth, or just another form of strategic thinking? Danny had no idea about the inheritance either, but his behavior remained exactly the same. He showed up that Thursday to help me replace some rotting boards on the back deck, brought homemade sandwiches for lunch, and spent the afternoon listening to my stories about the early days of my business. Uncle James, he said as we worked, I've been saving up to buy a house. Nothing fancy, just a small place with a yard where I can have my players over for team barbecues. How much have you saved? About $30,000. I know it's not much, but I'm hoping to find something I can fix up myself. Maybe you could give me some pointers on what to look for. I watched this young man, this teacher who made $38,000 a year and still found ways to help others, talking about his modest dreams with genuine excitement. No mention of scalability or disruption or passive income streams. Just honest work toward an honest goal. Danny, I said, you're going to make a wonderful homeowner. Any house would be lucky to have you caring for it. He grinned, that same smile he'd had as a kid when he'd helped me in the garage. Thanks, Uncle James. That means a lot coming from you. Robert called that Friday evening to confirm the details for Sunday's gathering. I've invited both boys for dinner, he said. I told them I had something important to discuss about family business. Danny's coming at 4, Marcus said he'd be there by 5. How do you want to handle this? Directly. Margaret's letter was clear, the family should know her wishes and the reasoning behind them. She believed that understanding consequences was the only way people could learn from their mistakes. And if Marcus doesn't take it well? Robert was quiet for a moment. James, some lessons can only be learned the hard way. You've protected him from consequences his entire life. Maybe it's time he faced some. That weekend, I found myself looking at everything differently. The house that Marcus wanted me to sell suddenly felt more precious, more like a sanctuary than a burden. The projects I worked on, repairing Mrs. Patterson's porch, organizing my tools, maintaining the property, felt less like busy work and more like acts of stewardship. Saturday evening, Marcus knocked on my bedroom door. I was reading, something I'd been doing more of since our relationship had grown strained. Dad? Can I come in? I set down my book. Of course. He sat on the edge of the bed, looking uncharacteristically nervous. I wanted to apologize for some of the things I've said recently. I know I've been difficult. What brought this on? Marcus ran his hands through his hair. I've been talking to some people, mentors, professors from business school. They've been helping me understand that success isn't just about individual achievement. It's about building something sustainable, something that honors what came before. The words sounded rehearsed, like he'd practiced them. But there was something else in his voice, genuine uncertainty, maybe even fear. Marcus, what's really going on? You seem worried about something. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. I think I might have made some mistakes, Dad. With my priorities, with how I've been treating people. Treating you. What kind of mistakes? The app idea, the one I've been working on. The investors asked some hard questions about user ethics and long-term sustainability. They wanted to know if I'd considered the impact on vulnerable populations, whether the technology could be used responsibly. He looked up at me with eyes that reminded me of the little boy he used to be. I realized I hadn't thought about any of that. I was so focused on monetization and growth that I never considered whether what I was building was actually good for people. This was the closest Marcus had come to admitting he might be wrong about something, and I felt a flicker of hope. Son, it's never too late to change direction. To build something you can be proud of. But I'm 27, Dad. I feel like I'm behind, like everyone else my age is already ahead of me in the game. What game? The success game. The wealth building game. The game where you either win big or spend your life struggling like. He stopped himself, but I knew what he was going to say. Like me? Marcus looked miserable. I didn't mean it that way. Yes, you did. And maybe you're right. Maybe I did spend my life struggling. But Marcus, I struggled for something I believed in. I struggled to build something real, something that helped people, something that would last. But you're not wealthy, Dad. You're not financially secure. What happens when you can't work anymore? The irony of his concern, just days before he'd learn about Margaret's inheritance, was almost overwhelming. But I couldn't tell him. Robert had made me promise to let the announcement happen naturally. Marcus, there are different kinds of security. There's the security that comes from money, and there's the security that comes from knowing who you are and what you stand for. He nodded, but I could see he didn't really understand. Not yet. Sunday morning dawned gray and cold, matching my mood. I dressed carefully, not formal, but respectful. The kind of clothes I'd wear to church or a family funeral. Because in a way, that's what this was going to be. The funeral of Marcus's expectations, and maybe of our relationship as father and son. I arrived at Robert's house at 3:30, 30 minutes early. I needed time to prepare myself for what was coming. Robert's house was a modest ranch-style home filled with books, teaching awards, and photographs of the students he'd mentored over 30 years of education. He'd never made much money, but he'd made a difference in hundreds of young lives. "You ready for this?" he asked as I helped him set the table. "No. But it needs to happen. James, I want you to know that this decision wasn't easy for me. Marcus is my nephew too. I love him. I know you do. But Margaret's instructions were clear. She wanted her money to go to people who would honor her values and use it responsibly. She'd watched this family for decades, and she knew what she was doing." Danny arrived promptly at 4, carrying a homemade apple pie and wearing the kind of smile that could light up a room. He hugged both Robert and me, asked about our health, and immediately offered to help with dinner preparations. "How are your students doing?" Robert asked as Danny arranged silverware. "Really well. We just finished our unit on financial literacy, teaching them about budgeting, saving, and the difference between needs and wants. One of my kids told me it was the first time anyone had explained money to him in a way that made sense." "That's important work," I said. Danny shrugged modestly. "It's just part of the job. But I love seeing that moment when things click for them, when they realize they have more control over their future than they thought." At 5:15, Marcus arrived, apologetic about being late and carrying a bottle of expensive wine. He was back to his business attire, crisp shirt, expensive watch, the armor of success he'd learned to wear. Sorry, he said, kissing Robert on the cheek and shaking my hand formally. Conference call ran long. You know how investors are, they want to dive deep into every detail. "How's the app development going?" Robert asked. Marcus brightened. "Really well, actually. We're in the final stages of securing series of funding. If everything goes according to plan, we should be launching beta testing within 6 months." "That's exciting," Danny said genuinely. "What does the app do again?" Marcus launched into his pitch, the same buzzword-heavy explanation he'd given me dozens of times. Danny listened politely, asking thoughtful questions, while Robert watched both young men with the careful attention of a longtime teacher. We made small talk through dinner, Robert's famous pot roast, Danny's apple pie, Marcus's stories about potential investors and networking events. It felt almost normal, like the family dinners we used to have when the boys were younger and Sarah was still alive. But I could feel the tension building, the weight of what was coming pressing down on all of us. After dinner, Robert cleared his throat and stood up. "Boys, I asked you here today because I have something important to share with you. Something that will affect both of your futures." Marcus and Danny looked at each other, then at Robert, with growing curiosity. "About 6 months ago, I was contacted by your great-aunt Margaret's lawyer. Margaret passed away last month, and she left behind a substantial inheritance." Marcus's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Danny set down his coffee cup. "Margaret left behind nearly $3 million, Robert continued, and she specified that it should go to family members who exemplify certain qualities: respect for elders, kindness to others, and genuine care for family." I watched Marcus's face transform as the implications hit him. His eyes lit up with a hunger I'd never seen before, and I could practically see the calculations running through his mind. $3 million. Marcus breathed. "She divided it into portions based on age and character assessments," Robert said, pulling out a thick envelope. "She appointed me as the executor and asked me to make determinations based on my observations of our family over the past several years." Marcus sat up straighter, his business persona clicking into place. "What kind of character assessments?" Robert opened the envelope and pulled out several handwritten pages. Margaret was very thorough. She attended family gatherings for decades, corresponded with family members, and took detailed notes about the character and behavior of the younger generation. "She was watching us?" Danny asked, amazed. "She was paying attention," Robert corrected. "She wanted her money to go to people who would use it wisely and honor the values she held dear." Marcus's mind was racing. I could see him reviewing every interaction he'd had with Margaret, every family gathering, trying to remember how he'd behaved and what impression he'd made. "So how is it divided?" Marcus asked, his voice carefully controlled. Robert looked directly at him. $1.8 million goes to the family member under 30 who best exemplifies respect, kindness, and genuine care for others. Marcus nodded confidently. With his MBA and business plans, he probably felt certain that Margaret would have seen him as the natural choice for building wealth and carrying on the family legacy. $800,000 goes to the older family member who has sacrificed the most for their family while maintaining their integrity. Both boys looked at me, and I felt my cheeks flush. I'd never thought of my choices as sacrifices, just as what fathers do for their children. And $200,000 is set aside for family members who need financial assistance and have proven themselves worthy of trust. Marcus was doing math in his head, probably figuring out how to leverage $1.8 million into even more money, how to finally prove to everyone that his modern approach to success was superior to my old-fashioned methods. Robert folded the letter and looked directly at Marcus. "Margaret's decision, based on my observations and recommendations, is as follows." The room fell completely silent. I could hear my own heartbeat. "The $1.8 million goes to Danny." The silence that followed Robert's announcement seemed to stretch for hours, though it was probably only seconds. I watched Marcus's face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and then a dawning horror as the reality hit him. "Danny?" Marcus's voice cracked on the name. "There must be some mistake." Danny looked as shocked as Marcus, but for different reasons. His face had gone pale, and he was staring at Robert like he'd just spoken in a foreign language. "There's no mistake," Robert said gently. Margaret's instructions were very specific. "The money goes to the family member who shows genuine respect for others, especially elders, who demonstrates kindness without expectation of reward, and who lives according to principles rather than just pursuing profit." "But I'm the one with the business degree," Marcus protested, his composure cracking. "I'm the one with plans, with vision. Danny's just a teacher." The dismissive way he said, "just a teacher," made Robert's jaw tighten. Robert had spent his entire career in education, had shaped hundreds of young minds, and had never made more than $40,000 a year doing it. Marcus, Robert said carefully, Margaret wasn't looking for business plans or profit potential. She was looking for character. Character. Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I have character. I'm building something, I'm innovating, You're what? Danny asked quietly. You're building an app to manipulate people into buying things they don't need. You've spent the last 6 months treating your father like he's stupid because he values different things than you do. You've mocked his work, his age, his intelligence. Marcus whirled on his cousin. Don't lecture me about how I treat my father. You don't live with him, you don't see. I see exactly how you treat him, Danny interrupted, his voice rising for the first time all evening. I see you roll your eyes when he talks. I see you dismiss his opinions and his experience. I heard you at the hardware store calling him a caveman to your friends. My heart sank. Danny had been there too. Marcus's face went white. You were eavesdropping. I was shopping for supplies to help Mrs. Chen fix her fence, for free, because she's elderly and can't afford a contractor. And I heard my cousin talking about his father like he was an embarrassment. That was taken out of context. What context makes it okay to call your father outdated and say his life's work is worthless? Marcus looked desperately at me, then at Robert. This isn't fair. I'm his son. I'm family. Being family means more than sharing blood, Robert said firmly. It means showing up for each other. It means respect, love, and support. Margaret understood that. But $1.8 million. Marcus's voice was becoming shrill. Danny doesn't even need that money. He's happy with his little teacher salary and his simple life. That's exactly why he deserves it, I said quietly. Everyone turned to look at me. I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 64 years in my joints, but also feeling clearer than I had in months. Marcus, do you want to know why Margaret chose Danny over you? Dad, please. Because when Danny looks at an elderly person, he sees wisdom and experience. When you look at an elderly person, you see obsolescence and burden. Because when Danny sees a problem, he asks how he can help. When you see a problem, you ask how you can profit from it. Marcus's hands were shaking. That's not true. Last week you told me I was showing signs of cognitive decline because I wanted to restore your mother's grandmother's chair instead of buying a new one on Amazon. You suggested I sell the house where you grew up, where your mother died, where every room holds memories of our family, because it would be more efficient for your future convenience. I was looking out for your best interests. No, son. You were looking out for your own interests and convincing yourself it was for my benefit. Danny had been listening to this exchange with growing understanding. Uncle James, is this about the other day? When Marcus suggested you move to a senior community? Among other things. Marcus spun to face Danny. You don't understand the full situation. Dad's getting older, he needs to think about practical arrangements. He's 64 and in perfect health. Danny exploded. He just installed a water heater by himself. He's helping neighbors with construction projects. What he needs is respect from his son, not to be treated like he's dying. I never said he was dying. You said he was showing signs of cognitive decline because he values craftsmanship over convenience. Robert held up his hand. That's enough. Both of you. He pulled out Margaret's letter and began reading. Margaret wrote, I have watched our family for many years, and I have seen how some young people honor their elders while others dismiss them. I have seen who helps others without being asked and who only thinks of themselves. Money should go to people who will use it to build something good in the world, not to people who see others as obstacles to their success. Marcus sat down heavily, his face in his hands. Robert continued reading. I have watched Marcus grow from a sweet child into a young man who has forgotten that wisdom comes from experience, not just education. He has potential, but he has lost his way. Perhaps losing something he thought he deserved will help him find it again. She wrote that. Marcus whispered. I have watched Danny grow into the kind of man who makes the world better simply by being in it. He treats elderly people with respect, children with patience, and his family with love. He works hard for modest rewards and never complains. He is what I hope all young people could become. Danny was crying now, silent tears streaming down his face. Robert folded the letter. Danny, you inherit $1.8 million. James, you inherit $800,000. And Marcus. Marcus looked up with desperate hope. Margaret specifically stated that you should receive nothing unless you can demonstrate genuine change in your character and treatment of others. She suggested that losing this inheritance might be the best thing that ever happened to you. The sound Marcus made was somewhere between a sob and a scream. He stood up so fast his chair fell over. This is insane. You can't judge someone's entire character based on a few bad moments. I'm young, I'm learning, You're 27 years old, I said quietly. You're not a child anymore. You're a man who made choices about how to treat his family, and now you're facing the consequences of those choices. Marcus turned on me with fury I'd never seen before. You set this up. You knew about this inheritance and you set me up to fail. I learned about it 10 days ago, and I haven't spoken to you any differently than I have for months. This is who you chose to be, Marcus. This is how you chose to treat me. I was stressed. I was focused on my career. I was trying to build something. At the expense of everything else, Danny said sadly. At the expense of kindness, respect, and family. Marcus looked around the room like a cornered animal. This isn't over. I'll contest this. I'll sue. Margaret was an old woman, she couldn't have been thinking clearly. And there it is, Robert said sadly. Even now, facing the consequences of your disrespect, your first instinct is to disrespect Margaret's memory and her choices. She's dead. She doesn't need the money. But we do. Danny asked. Marcus, I never expected this money. I never even knew Margaret was paying attention to us. I certainly never treated Uncle James well because I thought it might benefit me someday. That's exactly my point. Marcus shouted. You didn't have to think about it because you don't have ambition. You're content with your little life and your little salary because you don't want anything more. I want plenty more, Danny said calmly. I want my students to graduate and succeed. I want to buy a house and maybe start a family someday. I want to help my community and take care of the people I love. I just don't want those things at the expense of other people. Marcus stared at his cousin with something approaching hatred. You sanctimonious. That's enough, I said, standing up. Marcus, you need to leave. Dad, please. We can work this out. I can change, I can. Can you? Can you really? Because right now, in this moment, instead of reflecting on your behavior or apologizing for how you've treated me, you're thinking about lawsuits and money. You're calling your cousin sanctimonious for being kind. You're dismissing Margaret's wishes because they didn't benefit you. Marcus's face crumpled. For a moment, he looked like the little boy who used to crawl into bed with me during thunderstorms. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know I've been horrible, but I can change. Give me another chance. And there it was, the moment I'd been dreading and hoping for simultaneously. My son, finally acknowledging his behavior, finally asking for forgiveness. But was it genuine remorse, or just desperation at losing nearly $2 million? Marcus, I said gently, if there was no inheritance, if Danny hadn't just inherited that money, would you be apologizing to me right now? He opened his mouth to answer, then closed it. The truth was written all over his face. That's what I thought. Marcus grabbed his coat and headed for the door, then turned back one last time. Dad, when you're old and alone in that house, when you need help and Danny's too busy with his own life to take care of you, remember this moment. Remember that you chose him over your own son. The door slammed behind him, leaving the three of us in devastating silence. The week following Robert's announcement was the longest of my life. Marcus didn't come home that Sunday night, or Monday, or Tuesday. His room sat empty, his expensive clothes still hanging in the closet, his business book stacked neatly on his desk. It was like he'd simply vanished from my life. Danny called every day to check on me, but I could tell he was struggling with his own emotions about the inheritance. He'd inherited more money than he'd ever dreamed of having, but it had come at the cost of his relationship with his cousin and had exposed painful truths about our family. "Uncle James," he said during one of our phone calls, "I keep thinking about what Marcus said. About me not having ambition, about being content with less. Do you think he's right? Danny, ambition without compassion is just greed. You have plenty of ambition, you want to make a difference in young people's lives, you want to build a good life for yourself, you want to help others. That's not lacking ambition. That's having the right kind of ambition. But maybe I should have tried harder to understand Marcus's perspective. Maybe I was too quick to judge his business goals. Danny, there's nothing wrong with wanting financial success. The problem comes when you're willing to sacrifice your integrity, your relationships, and your respect for others to get it." On Thursday, I was in the garage working on a new project, building a small bookshelf for Danny's future house, when I heard a car in the driveway. My heart jumped, hoping it was Marcus, but it was Danny's old Honda Civic. He came into the garage looking tired and conflicted. "I went to see Marcus," he said without preamble. I set down my saw. "How is he?" "Angry. Hurt. Convinced that everyone conspired against him." Danny sat down on my workbench, running his hands through his hair. "Uncle James, I offered to split the inheritance with him." My heart sank. "Danny, you can't. I know what you're going to say, but he's family. And that's a lot of money for anyone to lose." "What did he say?" Danny's laugh was bitter. "He said he didn't want my charity. He said if the family couldn't recognize his potential and his value, then he didn't need us anyway. He's moving to California. He has some contacts there who understand innovation and disruption." We sat in silence for a while, listening to the sound of autumn wind rattling the garage door. "Do you think I made the right choice?" Danny asked. "Offering to share it?" "Danny, the fact that you offered tells me everything I need to know about why Margaret chose you. But he's still your son. And my cousin. Shouldn't families stick together?" I thought about that question for a long time before answering. Family should stick together when everyone is acting like family. When someone treats their relatives with disrespect and contempt, when they see family members as obstacles or embarrassments, they're choosing to put themselves outside the family circle. But what if he changes? What if losing this money is what finally makes him understand? Then he'll find his way back to us when he's ready. "But Danny, you can't sacrifice your own integrity trying to save someone who doesn't want to be saved." The next morning, Marcus came home to pack his things. I was in the kitchen when I heard his car, and I waited, hoping he'd come talk to me before he left. Instead, I heard him moving around upstairs, opening drawers and closets, packing his life into suitcases. After an hour, he came downstairs with 3 large bags and set them by the front door. Only then did he come into the kitchen where I was sitting with my morning coffee. "I'm leaving," he said simply. "I know. I suppose you're happy about this. Your golden boy Danny gets the money, and the son who disappointed you gets nothing." I looked at this young man I'd raised, this stranger wearing my son's face, and felt a grief deeper than anything I'd experienced since Sarah's death. "Marcus, I'm not happy. I'm heartbroken. Because I'm leaving. Because you still don't understand why you're leaving." He set his jaw stubbornly. "I'm leaving because my family has made it clear that I'm not valued here. You're leaving because you made it clear that you don't value us. That's not true. Isn't it? Marcus, when was the last time you asked me how I was feeling? When was the last time you showed interest in my life, my thoughts, my experiences? When was the last time you treated me like a person whose opinions mattered? Marcus opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. You've spent the last 6 months treating me like an inconvenience in my own home. You've mocked my work, my values, my intelligence. You've suggested I'm mentally declining because I don't understand your world. You've made it clear that you see me as an obstacle to your success rather than as your father. I was trying to help you see new possibilities. No, Marcus. You were trying to make me feel small so you could feel big. There's a difference. He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker across his face, maybe recognition, maybe regret. But then his pride reasserted itself. Fine. You want to live in the past with your old furniture and your outdated values? You want to pretend that Danny's simple little life is somehow superior to real ambition? Go ahead. But don't come crying to me when you realize that the world doesn't care about your principles. He picked up his bags and headed for the door. Marcus, I called after him. He stopped but didn't turn around. I love you. No matter what happens, no matter how angry you are or how far you go, you're still my son and I love you. His shoulders tensed, and for a moment I thought he might turn around, might finally break down the wall he'd built between us. Instead, he walked out the door and drove away. I sat in my empty kitchen for a long time after that, staring at the chair where he used to sit as a boy, where Sarah used to help him with homework, where we'd made plans and shared dreams and talked about the future. Danny found me there 3 hours later. He had a key and had let himself in when I didn't answer his knocks. Uncle James. Are you okay? I looked up at this young man who'd somehow become the son I'd hoped Marcus would be, respectful, kind, genuinely caring about others, and felt a complex mix of gratitude and loss. I'm proud of you, Danny. Your great-aunt Margaret made the right choice. Danny sat down across from me. It doesn't feel right, Uncle James. That money should have gone to Marcus. He's your son. Money doesn't make someone family, Danny. Character does. Respect does. Love does. But what if this destroys him? What if he never recovers from this? I thought about my son, driving toward California with his anger and his pride and his unshakable belief that the world owed him something because of his education and ambition. Danny, some people have to lose everything before they can find themselves. Maybe this is Marcus's rock bottom. Maybe he needs to discover who he is when he doesn't have his father's house to live in, his family's support to fall back on, and a fortune to fantasize about. And if he doesn't? If he just becomes more bitter and angry? Then that's his choice to make. I can't save someone from themselves, Danny. I can't love him enough to fix his character for him. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, two men separated by nearly 40 years but connected by shared values and mutual respect. What are you going to do with your inheritance? I asked. Danny smiled sadly. Help people, I guess. Set up a scholarship fund for kids who want to go to college but can't afford it. Maybe buy that house I've been dreaming about and turn it into a place where my students can come for tutoring and mentorship. Use it the way I think Margaret would have wanted. And you? What are you going to do with $800,000? I looked around the kitchen, at the house I'd built with Sarah, at the life we'd created together. I'm going to live, Danny. I'm going to travel to places Sarah and I always talked about visiting. I'm going to volunteer my skills to help people who need them. I'm going to enjoy being 64 years old without apologizing for it. And if Marcus comes back? If Marcus comes back with a changed heart and genuine respect for his family, then he'll always be welcome. But I won't chase him, Danny. I won't enable his disrespect anymore just because I'm afraid of losing him. That evening, alone in the house for the first time since Marcus had moved back home 6 months earlier, I sat in Sarah's restored rocking chair and thought about the turns life takes. How the boy I'd raised to value success and achievement had learned those lessons too well and forgotten the more important lessons about love and respect. How the nephew I'd watched grow up from a distance had somehow absorbed the values I'd tried to instill in my own son. I thought about Margaret, this quiet woman who'd watched our family for decades, who'd seen things we couldn't see because we were too close to the situation. Who'd understood that money was just a tool, and that the most important question wasn't who needed it most, but who would use it best. And I thought about Sarah, about what she would have said about all this. I could almost hear her voice, "James, you did your best. You can't control who your children become, you can only control who you choose to be." I'm recording this story 6 months after Marcus left for California, and I want to share with you what I've learned during this time, both the painful lessons and the hopeful ones. Marcus did move to California. He's working for a tech startup in San Francisco, living in a shared apartment with 3 roommates, making about a third of what he thought he'd be making by now. We've exchanged a few text messages, brief, polite, distant. He tells me he's building his network and gaining valuable experience. I tell him I love him and miss him. Neither of us mentions the inheritance. Through mutual friends, I've heard that he's struggling more than he'd admit. The tech world is brutal for young people without connections or proven track records. His business school education opened doors, but his lack of real experience and his attitude toward entry-level work has made it hard for him to advance. Part of me wants to call him, to offer help, to try to bridge the gap between us. But I've learned something important these past months: you can't love someone into respecting you. Respect has to be chosen, earned, and maintained through actions, not demanded through guilt or family obligation. Danny, meanwhile, has become the son I'd always hoped for, though not in any way I could have expected. He bought a beautiful old farmhouse about 20 minutes from my place, a house that needed work but had good bones and unlimited potential. Every weekend, we work on it together, and I've rediscovered the joy of teaching someone who actually wants to learn. "Uncle James," he said last Saturday as we installed new kitchen cabinets, "I want you to know that this inheritance, it's not just mine. It's ours. Family money should benefit the whole family. Danny, Margaret left that money to you specifically. Because she knew I'd use it the way she wanted, to build something good, to help people, to honor the family. But you're part of that vision too. And he has used it well. Danny set up a scholarship fund that will send 2 kids to college every year. He's turned part of his new house into a tutoring center where students can get free help with homework and life skills. He's hired local contractors, some of them my old employees, to help with renovation projects, creating work and supporting the community. But the most important thing Danny did was something simpler and more profound. 2 weeks ago, he showed up at my house on a Sunday morning with coffee and donuts from the bakery downtown. "Uncle James, I want to learn everything you can teach me about construction, about business, about life. Not because I need to know it for my career, but because you're my family and your knowledge matters to me." We spent that entire day in the garage, and I taught him how to restore furniture, how to read wood grain, how to use tools that his generation has largely forgotten. But more than that, I told him stories about his grandmother Sarah, about the early days of my business, about the mistakes I'd made and the lessons I'd learned. Danny listened to every word, asked thoughtful questions, and made me feel like my experiences were valuable again. Like my perspective mattered. Like I was more than just an aging obstacle to someone else's ambitions. "You know what the difference is between you and Marcus?" I told him as we worked on refinishing an old desk. "What's that?" "Marcus always wanted to be better than the people who came before him. You want to build on what they created. Marcus saw my experience as something to surpass. You see it as something to learn from. Maybe Marcus will figure that out someday. Maybe. But Danny, I can't wait for him to figure it out. I can't spend whatever years I have left hoping he'll become someone he's shown no interest in being. That must be incredibly painful." It is. But you know what's more painful? Wasting the love and respect that's right in front of you while you're waiting for someone else to change. I need to tell you something that might be hard to hear, especially if you're watching this as a parent or as someone who's struggled with family relationships. Sometimes, the people we love most are the ones who treat us worst. Sometimes, the children we sacrifice everything for are the ones who value us least. And sometimes, the love we find in unexpected places is more precious than the love we think we deserve. Marcus was my son, my blood, the child I'd raised and protected and provided for. But Danny became my family through choice, through respect, through the daily decision to value our relationship. I've learned that you can't force someone to respect you, but you can choose to stop accepting disrespect. You can't make someone value your contributions, but you can stop diminishing yourself to make others feel better about their choices. Most importantly, I've learned that family is something you build, not something you're born into. Blood makes you related, but love, respect, and genuine care make you family. 3 weeks ago, on a cold October evening, I was reading in the living room when I heard a car in the driveway. It was late, past 9 o'clock, and Danny usually called before visiting. I looked out the window and saw a car I didn't recognize, a beat-up Honda with California plates. My heart started pounding before my mind fully processed what I was seeing. Marcus climbed out of the driver's seat, moving slowly, carefully, like someone who'd been driving for a very long time. He looked different. Thinner, older somehow, wearing jeans and a simple sweater instead of his usual business attire. His hair was longer, less perfectly styled, and there was something in his posture, a humility I hadn't seen since he was a child. I opened the front door before he could knock. "Marcus." "Dad." His voice was hoarse, uncertain. "I know I don't have the right to be here. I know you probably don't want to see me. You're my son. You always have the right to be here." He stood on the porch for a moment, seeming to gather courage, then looked directly into my eyes. "Dad, I came to apologize. Not because I want something from you, not because I'm hoping to change what happened with the inheritance. I came to apologize because I finally understand what I did to you, and I'm ashamed." Something in his voice, a broken quality I'd never heard before, made me step aside and gesture him into the house. We sat in the living room, in the same chairs where we'd had so many arguments over the past year. Marcus looked around the room as if seeing it for the first time, the family photos, the furniture I'd built by hand, the rocking chair I'd restored that he'd once mocked. "California didn't work out," he said simply. "What happened?" Marcus was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I got a job at a startup. Exactly the kind of company I'd dreamed of working for, young, innovative, disrupting traditional industries. Everyone was brilliant, everyone was ambitious, everyone was going to change the world." "Sounds like what you wanted." "I thought it was. But Dad, they treated me exactly the way I treated you." I felt my chest tighten. The founders were all in their early 20s. They'd started the company right out of college, and they saw anyone over 25 as outdated, slow to adapt. They called people my age, legacy employees, people who were useful for their experience but couldn't really understand the future. How did that feel? Marcus's laugh was hollow. Horrible. Humiliating. I'd be in meetings trying to contribute ideas, and they'd dismiss them as old-school thinking or industrial-age concepts. They'd talk around me like I wasn't there, like my perspective was worthless because I hadn't grown up with their technology. I watched my son describe experiences that mirrored exactly what he'd put me through, and I felt a complex mix of sadness and hope. "There was this one day," Marcus continued, "when I was trying to explain a marketing strategy I'd learned in business school. It was a good idea, proven, effective, based on solid research. But one of the founders cut me off and said, 'That's how companies thought about marketing 5 years ago. We're building something revolutionary here. Maybe you should just focus on execution and let us handle the strategy.' What did you do?" I sat there and took it. Just like. He looked up at me with eyes full of pain. Just like you sat there and took it when I said the same kinds of things to you. The admission hung between us like a bridge I wasn't sure either of us was ready to cross. Marcus, why are you telling me this? Because I finally understood what you tried to tell me. About respect, about valuing experience, about treating people like they matter regardless of their age or their approach to life. And I realized that I'd become exactly the kind of person I hate. Someone who thinks they're better than everyone else because they're younger or more educated or have different ideas about success. He stood up and walked to the mantel, where family photos told the story of our life together. His fingers traced the frame of a picture from his high school graduation, him in his cap and gown, me beaming with pride beside him, Sarah's absence a shadow over what should have been a celebration. "I miss her," he said softly. "I know you do. I've been thinking about what she would say about all this. About how I've been acting, about the man I've become. What do you think she'd say?" Marcus turned back to me, tears streaming down his face. "She'd be disappointed. She'd be heartbroken that I forgot everything you both tried to teach me about being a good person." I stood up and walked to him, this broken young man who was finally starting to understand what he'd lost. "Marcus, your mother loved you unconditionally. But she also expected you to be better than your worst impulses. She expected you to choose kindness over cleverness, respect over pride. I failed her. I failed you. I failed everyone. Son, failure isn't final unless you choose to make it final." Marcus collapsed into the rocking chair, Sarah's grandmother's chair that he'd once mocked me for restoring. He ran his hands over the smooth wood, feeling the craftsmanship that had lasted 8 decades. "This is beautiful," he whispered. "I never really looked at it before. I was so focused on why you were spending time on it that I never saw what you were creating. It's not just the chair, Marcus. It's the connection to family, to history, to the idea that some things are worth preserving and improving rather than just replacing. I threw all of that away, didn't I? Not all of it. You're here now. You're seeing it now." Marcus looked up at me with the expression of a child who'd broken something precious and didn't know how to fix it. "Dad, is there any way back from this? Any way to earn forgiveness, to rebuild what I destroyed?" I sat down across from him, in the chair where I'd sat through his tantrums as a toddler, his heartbreaks as a teenager, his dreams as a young adult. "Marcus, forgiveness isn't something you earn. It's something you accept. I forgave you months ago. The question is whether you can forgive yourself and choose to be different moving forward." I don't know how to be different. I've spent so long thinking that success meant being better than other people, smarter than other people, more important than other people. I don't know how to just be humble. Humility isn't about thinking you're worthless, son. It's about understanding that everyone has value, everyone has something to teach you, everyone deserves respect regardless of their age or education or bank account. Marcus nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "The people in California, they taught me what it feels like to be dismissed, to be treated like my thoughts don't matter. It was awful, Dad. I can't believe I did that to you. But now you know. And now you can choose to be better. Even without the inheritance. Even knowing that I lost all that money because of my own arrogance. Marcus, that money was never yours to begin with. It was Margaret's, and she got to choose how to distribute it based on her values. You didn't lose something that belonged to you, you learned something about who you want to be." We talked until almost midnight that night. Not about business or money or success, but about life, about family, about the man Marcus wanted to become and the work it would take to get there. When he finally went upstairs to his old room, the room I'd kept exactly as he'd left it, hoping he'd return, I felt something I hadn't felt in months, hope. The Marcus who came back from California was not the same person who'd left 6 months earlier. The change wasn't immediate or dramatic, it was gradual, like watching someone slowly recover from a long illness. He got a job at a local construction company, starting as a basic laborer despite his MBA. The old Marcus would have seen this as beneath him, would have complained about wasting his education on manual labor. The new Marcus saw it as an opportunity to learn, to understand the business from the ground up, to prove himself through work rather than words. "Dad," he said one evening after his first week on the job, "I had no idea how physically demanding this work is." "How did you do this for 40 years? "You build up to it," I said, trying not to smile at his obvious exhaustion. "And you find meaning in the work that makes the tiredness worth it." "What kind of meaning?" "Drive by the houses you've built in 10 years. See families living in spaces you helped create. Watch kids playing in yards you helped grade and landscape. That's meaning, Marcus. Knowing that your work makes other people's lives better." He nodded thoughtfully. "The guys at work, they're not what I expected." "How so?" "I thought construction workers would be, I don't know, less intelligent. Less aware. But Dad, some of these guys are incredibly smart. They understand engineering principles, project management, problem solving in ways that rival anything I learned in business school. They just express it differently." "Exactly. And they've been patient with me, even though I'm obviously the rich kid trying to learn blue-collar work. They could have made fun of me or treated me like an outsider, but they've been kind." "How does that make you feel?" Marcus thought about the question seriously. "Grateful. And ashamed of how I used to think about people who work with their hands." The real test came 3 weeks after Marcus returned, when Danny came over for our usual Sunday dinner. I'd been nervous about how the cousins would interact, whether the inheritance would create permanent tension between them. Marcus was in the kitchen when Danny arrived, helping me prepare the meal. The sight of my son chopping vegetables while Danny and I worked around him felt almost miraculous. "Danny," Marcus said when his cousin walked in, "I owe you an apology." Danny stopped in the doorway, clearly surprised. "Marcus, you don't." "Yes, I do. I was an arrogant, disrespectful jerk, and you called me out on it. You defended Dad when I was too proud to see how badly I was treating him. And when you inherited Margaret's money, you offered to share it with me even though I'd done nothing to deserve it." "Your family," Danny said simply. "No," Marcus shook his head. "Your family. I was just someone who happened to be related to you. There's a difference." Danny looked at me, uncertain how to respond to this new version of his cousin. "Danny," Marcus continued, "I want you to know that I'm genuinely happy Margaret chose you. You deserve that money. You've earned it through the way you live your life, the way you treat people, the way you use your resources to help others." "Marcus." Danny started. "Let me finish. I spent months being bitter about losing money that was never mine to begin with. But I've realized that losing that inheritance was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to face who I'd become and decide who I wanted to be." The three of us worked together preparing dinner, and for the first time in over a year, it felt like we were actually a family. Marcus asked Danny about his students, listened when I shared stories about my current projects, and contributed to the conversation without trying to dominate it or prove his superiority. During dinner, Marcus brought up something that surprised me. "Dad, I've been thinking about the business." "My old business?" "Your business. The one you built from nothing, the one I dismissed as small thinking and outdated. What about it?" "I think you were right to be proud of it. I think I was wrong to see it as less than what I wanted to build." "Marcus, your ambitions aren't wrong. Wanting to build something big, wanting to innovate and create, those are good goals. But not at the expense of everything else. Not if it means looking down on the people who came before me or forgetting that success without character is just sophisticated failure." Danny smiled. "Your dad always said that. Success without character is just sophisticated failure." "Mom used to say it too," Marcus said softly. I'd forgotten. After dinner, the three of us sat on the front porch despite the cold, wrapped in blankets and sharing stories. Marcus told us about his experiences in California, not just the failures, but what he'd learned about himself and about the kind of person he wanted to be. The hardest part, he said, wasn't the financial struggle or the professional disappointment. It was the loneliness. I'd burned bridges with my family, and I couldn't make real friends because I'd trained myself to see everyone as either an opportunity or a threat. What changed? I asked. I met this old man, probably about your age, Dad, who worked as a janitor in our office building. Everyone ignored him, treated him like furniture. But one night I was working late, feeling sorry for myself, and he started talking to me. Marcus paused, staring out at the street where he'd learned to ride a bike, where he'd played with neighborhood kids before ambition and pride had isolated him. His name was Frank. He'd been a mechanical engineer for 30 years before his company downsized him out of a job. He took the janitorial work to pay the bills while he looked for something in his field, but he was 58, and nobody wanted to hire a 58-year-old engineer. Did he find anything? Danny asked. No. But Dad, he wasn't bitter about it. He wasn't angry at the young engineers who'd replaced him or resentful about doing work that was beneath his education. He was just graceful about it. Dignified. What did he say to you? He told me that success isn't about what you get from the world, it's about what you give to it. He said that every job, every interaction, every day was an opportunity to make someone else's life a little better. Marcus turned to look at me directly. He reminded me of you, Dad. The way you used to talk about work, about taking pride in what you do regardless of whether other people think it's important. Where is Frank now? He died of a heart attack 2 months ago. Alone in his apartment, working on a crossword puzzle. Marcus's voice broke slightly. I found out when I went looking for him after I'd quit my job. I wanted to thank him for changing my perspective, and he was already gone. I'm sorry, son. Me too. But Dad, his death made me realize something. Frank had 30 years of experience, wisdom, and kindness to offer the world. But he spent his last years being dismissed and overlooked because people like me thought his age made him irrelevant. Marcus stood up and walked to the porch railing, looking out at the quiet neighborhood where he'd grown up. I don't want to be the person who dismisses wisdom because it comes from someone older. I don't want to be the person who thinks education is more valuable than experience. I don't want to be the person who sees family as a burden instead of a blessing. So what do you want to be? I asked. Marcus turned back to us, and in the porch light, I could see the boy I'd raised alongside the man he was choosing to become. I want to be someone you and Mom would be proud of. I want to be someone who builds things that last, who treats people with respect, who understands that success without character is worthless. And how do you plan to do that? I want to learn the business, Dad. Your business. Not so I can modernize it or scale it or disrupt it, but so I can understand what you built and why it mattered. I want to work with you, if you'll let me. The request hit me like a physical force. After months of being dismissed as outdated and irrelevant, my son was asking to learn from me. Marcus, I'd like that. But I need you to understand something. What? This isn't about proving you've changed so you can get back in everyone's good graces. This isn't about positioning yourself for some future benefit. If you're going to work with me, it has to be because you genuinely respect what I do and want to learn from it. I do respect it, Dad. I finally understand that building something real, something that helps people, something that lasts, that's worth more than any amount of money. Danny had been listening to this conversation with growing amazement. Marcus, what about your tech career? Your startup dreams? Marcus smiled sadly. Danny, I realized something in California. I was so focused on disrupting existing industries that I never stopped to ask whether those industries were worth disrupting. I was so concerned with being innovative that I forgot to ask whether my innovations would actually make the world better. And now? Now I want to build things. Real things. Houses, businesses, relationships, community. I want to do work that matters, even if it's not scalable or disruptive or whatever other buzzwords I used to obsess over. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw something I'd feared was gone forever. I saw humility, genuine humility, and the kind of wisdom that only comes from experiencing real failure and choosing to learn from it rather than blame others for it. Marcus, I said carefully, if you're serious about this, about learning the business and working together, we need to establish some ground rules. Anything. You start at the bottom. You learn every aspect of the work, from mixing concrete to reading blueprints to dealing with difficult customers. You don't get special treatment because you're my son or because you have an MBA. I understand. You treat every person we work with, customers, suppliers, subcontractors, laborers, with respect. Not because they might be useful to you someday, but because they're human beings who deserve dignity. Agreed. And Marcus, this isn't about getting rich. This is about doing good work, solving problems, and building something that will be here long after we're gone. If you're looking for a way to make millions of dollars, this isn't it. Marcus smiled, and for the first time in years, it looked genuine. Dad, I spent 6 months chasing millions of dollars and lost everything that actually mattered. I'm not interested in getting rich anymore. I'm interested in getting right. Danny laughed, the sound full of relief and joy. Marcus, that might be the smartest thing you've ever said. Well, Marcus grinned back, I learned it from a very smart teacher. He was looking at me when he said it, and I felt something heal inside my chest that I hadn't even realized was broken. The months that followed Marcus's return weren't easy. Changing deeply ingrained patterns of behavior and thought is like learning to walk again after an injury. It requires patience, practice, and a willingness to stumble before you find your balance. Marcus threw himself into learning the construction trade with the same intensity he'd once applied to his business schemes, but now that intensity was tempered with humility and respect. He showed up early, stayed late, and asked questions that demonstrated genuine interest rather than impatience with outdated methods. Dad, he said one morning as we drove to a job site, I'm starting to understand why you love this work. What do you mean? Yesterday, when we finished Mrs. Rodriguez's kitchen renovation, did you see her face? She started crying because she'd been cooking in that broken-down kitchen for 15 years, and now she has something beautiful and functional. That's the best part of the job. In my old world, success was measured in metrics, user acquisition, revenue growth, market penetration. But this is different. Success is Mrs. Rodriguez crying because her kitchen is beautiful. Success is Mr. Chen telling his neighbors about the honest contractors who didn't try to oversell him. Success is knowing that the house you built will still be standing when your grandchildren are grown. I watched my son discover the satisfaction that comes from work that directly improves people's lives, and I felt a pride different from anything I'd experienced during his academic achievements. This was the pride that comes from watching someone choose character over convenience. But the real test of Marcus's transformation came 6 weeks after his return, when we encountered our first difficult customer. Mr. Brennan was a wealthy businessman who'd hired us to build a deck and outdoor kitchen for his mansion across town. He was exactly the kind of client Marcus would have once identified with, successful, demanding, focused on status and appearance. But Mr. Brennan was also condescending, impatient, and dismissive of anyone he considered beneath his social status. I don't understand why this is taking so long, Brennan complained during our second week on the job. How hard can it be to nail some boards together? I saw Marcus's jaw tighten, but he kept working without responding. And frankly, Brennan continued, I'm not impressed with the quality of work from your assistant there. He was referring to Marcus. He seems inexperienced. Maybe you should have brought someone more qualified. The old Marcus would have exploded at being called unqualified, would have launched into a speech about his education and capabilities. The new Marcus set down his hammer and looked directly at Mr. Brennan. Sir, I am inexperienced. I'm learning this trade from my father, who's been doing this work for 40 years. If you're not satisfied with my work, I'm happy to redo anything that doesn't meet your standards. Brennan seemed taken aback by the polite, honest response. Well, I just expected more efficiency. "We're building something that will last for decades," Marcus replied. "That requires patience and attention to detail. If you'd prefer faster work, there are contractors who specialize in speed over quality. But if you want something built right, this is how long it takes." I watched this exchange with amazement. Marcus had found a way to stand up for the work without being defensive, to educate the customer without being condescending, to maintain his dignity while showing respect for the process. After Brennan walked away, I pulled Marcus aside. "That was well handled. 6 months ago, I would have either been offended that he questioned my qualifications, or I would have agreed with him that physical labor was beneath someone with my education. And now? Now I understand that every kind of honest work has dignity, and that being inexperienced isn't shameful, it's just temporary. Your mother would be proud of you." Marcus smiled, the kind of smile that starts in the eyes and spreads slowly across the face. "I hope so, Dad. I really hope so." That evening, Danny came over for dinner and brought news that would change everything once again. "I've been thinking about the scholarship fund," he said as we sat around the kitchen table. "And about Margaret's wishes for the money." "What about them?" "She wanted the inheritance to build something good in the world, to help people and honor family values. I think there's a way to do more with it than I originally planned." Marcus looked up from his plate. "What do you mean?" Danny turned to him with a serious expression. "Marcus, what would you think about starting a business together? A construction and renovation company that specializes in helping elderly homeowners and low-income families." Marcus stared at his cousin. "You want to go into business with me? After everything I did? I want to go into business with the person you're becoming. The person who spends his days learning honest work from his father and doesn't complain about starting at the bottom." "But Danny, you're a teacher. You love teaching." "I'll always be a teacher. But maybe I can teach different lessons, lessons about craftsmanship, about building community, about using success to lift others up instead of just elevating yourself." I looked at these two young men, one who'd inherited a fortune and wanted to use it to help others, one who'd lost a fortune and was learning to find meaning in simpler things, and felt a gratitude so deep it was almost overwhelming. "What would this business look like?" I asked. "We'd use Margaret's money as startup capital," Danny explained. "But instead of maximizing profits, we'd focus on providing quality work at affordable prices for people who need it most. Elderly homeowners who can't afford major repairs. Young families who want to improve their homes but don't have big budgets. Community projects that benefit everyone." Marcus was quiet for a long time, thinking. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured and thoughtful. "It would never make us rich." "No," Danny agreed. "It probably wouldn't. We'd be working with the most challenging customers, people with limited budgets, complex needs, high expectations." "Probably." Marcus smiled slowly. "It sounds perfect." And so, 8 months after Robert's announcement had destroyed Marcus's expectations and sent him fleeing to California, the three of us began planning a business that would honor Margaret's memory and her values. "What should we call it?" Danny asked. Marcus looked around the kitchen where we'd shared so many meals, so many arguments, so many attempts to understand each other across the generational divide. "Margaret's Legacy Construction," he said without hesitation. "Because that's what this really is, her legacy. The idea that money should build something good in the world, that success should lift others up, that family means taking care of each other." I felt tears prick my eyes. "She would have loved that." "Do you think she knew?" Marcus asked. "When she made her decision about the inheritance, do you think she knew this might happen?" I thought about Margaret, the quiet observer who'd watched our family for decades, who'd understood us better than we understood ourselves. I think she knew exactly what she was doing. Just when I thought our story had reached its natural conclusion, life delivered one more surprise that would test everything we'd learned and change our understanding of Margaret's plan completely. It was a cold December morning, 3 months after we'd officially launched Margaret's Legacy Construction, when Patricia Hoffman called again. Mr. Mitchell, I have some additional information about your great-aunt Margaret's estate that I think you and your family should know. My heart sank. Additional information? It concerns the portion of the inheritance that was designated for Marcus. I sat down heavily. What about it? Margaret left very specific instructions about what should happen if Marcus demonstrated genuine change in his character and treatment of others. She anticipated that losing the inheritance might be exactly what he needed to find his way back to family values. What? There's a second letter, Mr. Mitchell. One that I was instructed to open only if your brother Robert determined that Marcus had shown authentic growth and remorse for his behavior. My hands were shaking as I called Robert and Danny for an emergency meeting. Marcus was at work. He'd been putting in 10-hour days learning electrical work from our senior electrician, but I asked Robert to call him home. An hour later, we were all gathered in my living room again, this time with Patricia Hoffman joining us via video call. Margaret was more perceptive than any of us realized, Patricia began. She understood that some people need to lose something before they can appreciate it. She specifically wrote that Marcus's inheritance should be withheld initially, but that if he demonstrated genuine change within 1 year, he should receive his portion after all. Marcus looked like he'd been struck by lightning. She planned this. She planned for the possibility. She hoped that experiencing consequences for his disrespect would teach him empathy and humility. Based on Mr. Roberts' reports and my conversation with your father, it appears her strategy worked. Robert pulled out another letter, this one sealed with wax. She asked me to open this only if I believed Marcus had genuinely changed, not just temporarily modified his behavior to regain favor. And? Marcus asked, his voice barely audible. Marcus, Robert said gently, you spent 6 months learning hard lessons about respect, humility, and the value of honest work. You came home and apologized not because you wanted something, but because you finally understood what you'd done wrong. You've spent 3 months working alongside your father, learning from him, treating him with the respect he's always deserved. Marcus was crying now, quiet tears that spoke of relief and gratitude and overwhelming emotion. Margaret's final gift to you is $1.2 million. Not as much as Danny received, because she believed he'd already proven his character over many years. But enough to secure your future and contribute to the business you're building together. The room erupted in a mixture of laughter, tears, and disbelief. Danny immediately hugged his cousin, and I found myself overwhelmed by Margaret's wisdom and long-term thinking. There's one more thing, Patricia added. Margaret included a letter specifically for Marcus. Robert opened the final envelope and began reading. Marcus, if you are hearing this letter, it means you have learned the lessons I hoped you would learn. You have discovered that respect is more valuable than money, that family is more important than individual success, and that true strength comes from lifting others up rather than putting them down. Marcus was sobbing now, the weight of months of pain and growth finally finding release. I watched you grow from a sweet child into an angry young man who forgot his values in pursuit of success. I hoped that losing something you thought you deserved would help you remember what you actually needed. If I was right, then this money is yours to use wisely. If I was wrong, then you will never receive this letter, and that will be its own kind of lesson. Build something beautiful with your life, Marcus. Honor your parents, love your family, and remember that the greatest inheritance anyone can leave is not money, but character. Robert folded the letter and looked at Marcus with tears in his eyes. She loved you, Marcus. Even when she was disappointed in your choices, she loved you and believed you could become better. Marcus looked around the room at his family, the father he'd dismissed, the uncle who'd watched over him, the cousin who'd offered to share an inheritance he didn't deserve. I don't deserve this, he whispered. None of us deserve the love we receive, I said. We just try to become worthy of it. Dad, I want to do something with this money. Something that would make Margaret proud, something that would honor Mom's memory. What did you have in mind? Marcus wiped his eyes and sat up straighter. I want to use it to expand Margaret's legacy construction. I want to create a program that teaches construction skills to young people who can't afford college, that provides affordable housing repairs for elderly residents, that builds community spaces for underserved neighborhoods. Danny's face lit up. Marcus, that's incredible. And I want to call it the Sarah Mitchell Community Building Initiative. After Mom. Because she taught me about kindness and service, and I forgot those lessons until I lost everything. I couldn't speak. The idea that my son wanted to honor his mother's memory through service to others, that he'd found a way to combine his business education with the values Sarah and I had tried to instill in him, was more than I'd ever dared to hope for. There's just one thing, Marcus added, looking directly at me. I want you to run it with me, Dad. Not because I need your help, but because your experience and wisdom are exactly what this kind of project needs. And because I want to spend whatever time we have left working together instead of working against each other. I'm telling you this story exactly 1 year after Robert first announced Margaret's inheritance, and I want you to know how it all turned out, not just the business, but the family, the relationships, and the lessons we all learned along the way. Margaret's legacy construction has become something none of us could have imagined. We've completed projects for 47 elderly homeowners, providing everything from accessibility modifications to complete kitchen renovations at cost or below. We've built 3 community gardens, renovated 2 youth centers, and created a vocational training program that has already graduated 12 young people into good-paying construction jobs. But more importantly, we've rebuilt our family. Marcus has become the man I'd always hoped he would be, respectful, hardworking, and genuinely committed to using his skills to help others. He still has his business education and his strategic thinking, but now he applies those skills to figuring out how to help more people more effectively, not how to maximize profit. Dad, he said to me last week as we installed grab bars in a bathroom for a 78-year-old veteran, I finally understand what you meant about finding meaning in the work. What do you understand? That the satisfaction doesn't come from the paycheck or the recognition. It comes from knowing that what you're doing matters to someone. That your work makes someone's life safer, more comfortable, more dignified. And how does that feel? Marcus smiled as he carefully adjusted the height of the grab bar to accommodate our client's specific needs. Like coming home. Danny has proven to be a natural business partner, combining his teacher's patience and communication skills with a genuine understanding of what our clients need. He's still teaching part-time, but he's found ways to integrate his educational background with our construction work, creating programs that teach young people life skills alongside trade skills. It's amazing, he told me recently, how many of my students have never been taught basic home maintenance, financial planning, or practical problem solving. We're not just teaching them how to use tools, we're teaching them how to build stable, independent lives. But perhaps the most important change has been in me. Working alongside my son again, seeing him choose humility over pride and service over self-interest, has reminded me that some things are worth waiting for, worth fighting for, worth believing in even when the evidence suggests otherwise. I'm 65 now, officially a senior citizen by most definitions. But I've never felt more vital, more purposeful, or more optimistic about the future. The inheritance from Margaret has given me financial security I never expected, but more importantly, it's given me something I'd thought was lost forever. A real relationship with my son. Dad, Marcus said to me just yesterday, I need to tell you something. We were in the garage, the same garage where he'd once mocked my work on the rocking chair, putting the finishing touches on a custom bookshelf for the children's section of our local library. What's that, son? I love you. And I respect you. And I'm sorry it took me so long to say that and really mean it. I love you too, Marcus. And I'm proud of the man you've chosen to become. Even though I wasted so much time. Even though I hurt you so badly. I looked at this young man who traveled so far from where he'd started, who'd lost everything he thought he wanted and found everything he actually needed. Marcus, you didn't waste time. You learned. And the person you are now, the person who values relationships over profits, who treats everyone with dignity, who uses his skills to help others, that person couldn't have existed without going through everything you went through. You really believe that? I know that. Because the Marcus who never experienced failure, who never had his pride broken, who never learned what it felt like to be dismissed and overlooked, that Marcus might never have developed empathy. He might never have learned to see others as equals rather than competition. Marcus nodded, understanding finally dawning in his eyes. Margaret knew that too, didn't she? That's why she structured the inheritance the way she did. I think Margaret understood that sometimes the people we love most need to fall down before they can learn to walk properly. We finished the bookshelf in comfortable silence, two men working together on something that would benefit children neither of us had met, in a library we'd probably never visit again. But the work felt meaningful precisely because it wasn't about us, wasn't about our benefit or recognition. That evening, the three of us, Marcus, Danny, and I, sat down to go over the business books. Margaret's legacy construction was not just surviving but thriving, though not in any way Marcus's old business school professors would have recognized as success. We're actually operating at a loss, Marcus said, reviewing the numbers. If this were a traditional business, we'd need to raise prices or cut costs. But it's not a traditional business, Danny pointed out. It's a mission that happens to be structured as a business. Exactly. And look at these. Marcus pointed to a different set of numbers. Client satisfaction scores, community impact metrics, employee retention rates. By those measures, we're incredibly successful. Which measures matter more to you? I asked. Marcus didn't hesitate. The second ones. Definitely the second ones. And 6 months ago? 6 months ago, I would have said anyone who prioritized satisfaction over profit was a bad businessman. Now I realize that anyone who prioritizes profit over satisfaction is a bad human being. That's a pretty fundamental shift in thinking. It's a fundamental shift in values, Dad. And I owe that to you, to Danny, to Margaret, and to Frank, the janitor who reminded me that dignity comes from how you treat others, not from how others treat you. What happened next was something none of us could have predicted, but it perfectly illustrated Margaret's wisdom about the ripple effects of character and kindness. Word about Margaret's legacy construction began spreading through our community, not through marketing or advertising, but through the stories of the people we'd helped. Mrs. Rodriguez told her church about the contractors who'd renovated her kitchen for the cost of materials. Mr. Chen recommended us to his neighbors after we'd repaired his roof for a fraction of what other companies had quoted. But the real catalyst came from an unexpected source. 3 months after we'd officially launched the business, I was at Murphy's Hardware picking up supplies when Joe Murphy Jr. approached me with a proposition. James, I've been hearing incredible things about what you and your boys are doing with this new company. We're just trying to help people, Joe. That's exactly what I mean. Listen, I've got a situation, and I think you might be the right people to handle it. He led me to his office behind the store and pulled out a thick folder. The city is developing a new affordable housing project, 30 homes for working families who can't afford market-rate housing. The original contractor they hired turned out to be unreliable, and the project is 6 months behind schedule. That's unfortunate. James, these families have been living in substandard conditions while waiting for these homes. Single mothers working 2 jobs, elderly couples on fixed incomes, young families just starting out. They need someone who cares more about getting the job done right than about maximizing profit margins. I understood immediately why Joe was talking to me. What's the timeline? 18 months to complete all 30 homes. The budget is tight, the oversight is intense, and the community is watching. It's exactly the kind of project that most contractors avoid because the profit margin is too slim. And you think we should take it on? Joe smiled. James, I think it's exactly what Margaret would have wanted her money to support. That evening, I brought the proposal to Marcus and Danny. We spread the plans across my kitchen table, the same table where we'd had so many difficult conversations, where Marcus had once dismissed my work as outdated, where we'd slowly rebuilt our relationship. 30 houses, Danny said, reviewing the specifications. This would be the biggest project any of us has ever tackled. It would require us to hire additional crews, rent more equipment, manage multiple sites simultaneously, Marcus added, his business training automatically analyzing the logistical challenges. And the profit margin is minimal, I noted. We'd basically be breaking even, maybe making a small profit if everything goes perfectly. The three of us looked at each other, and I could see the same thought forming in each of our minds. So we're doing it? Danny asked. We're doing it, Marcus confirmed. But there's something we need to discuss first, I said. A project this size, with this much community visibility, is going to attract attention. Other contractors, local media, maybe even state officials. Are we ready for that kind of scrutiny? Marcus leaned back in his chair, thinking. Dad, 6 months ago, I would have seen media attention as an opportunity for personal promotion. I would have been thinking about how to leverage this project into bigger, more profitable contracts. And now? Now I'm thinking about how to make sure those 30 families get the best homes we can possibly build for them. If that brings us attention, great. If it doesn't, that's fine too. The work is its own reward. Danny nodded. I'm more worried about doing right by the families than about what people say about us. Then we're ready, I said. The Margaret's Legacy Affordable Housing Project became the defining work of our young company. Over the next 18 months, we employed 47 people, including several of Marcus's former classmates who'd struggled to find meaningful work in their chosen fields. It's funny, one of them told Marcus during a lunch break. I spent 4 years learning how to maximize shareholder value, and here I am learning how to maximize family value instead. Which feels better? Marcus asked. This. Definitely this. At the end of the day, I can drive by houses where real families are living lives I helped make possible. That's worth more than any stock option. The project also attracted exactly the kind of attention I'd worried about, but it turned out to be overwhelmingly positive. Local news stations covered our progress, highlighting not just the construction work but our approach to community building and our commitment to treating workers and clients with dignity. What makes this project special, a reporter asked Marcus during one interview, is not just the affordable housing, but the way your company operates. Can you tell us about your philosophy? Marcus looked directly into the camera with the confidence of someone who finally knew who he was and what he stood for. Our philosophy is simple: good work done by good people for good reasons. We believe that business should serve the community, not the other way around. We believe that success should be measured by the positive impact you have on others, not just by the money you accumulate for yourself. That's quite different from typical business approaches. It's the approach my father taught me, though it took me a while to understand its value. He showed me that there's no satisfaction like the satisfaction that comes from work that makes other people's lives better. Watching my son speak with such clarity and conviction about values I'd tried to instill in him for decades was one of the proudest moments of my life. But the real validation came from the families themselves. Maria Santos, a single mother of 3 who received one of our homes, invited us to dinner after she'd been living there for 6 months. I want you to see what you've built, she said as she gave us a tour of the house Marcus and Danny had personally worked on for 3 weeks. It's not just the house, she continued, showing us her youngest daughter's bedroom. It's the fact that you built it like you were building it for your own family. You cared about details that the inspector would never see, about quality that won't show up for years. Her daughter, maybe 8 years old, ran up to Marcus with a drawing she'd made of the house. "Thank you for building my room," she said, throwing her arms around his legs. Marcus knelt down to her level, accepting the drawing with the solemnity of someone receiving a priceless gift. "Thank you for letting us build it for you." After dinner, as we drove home, Marcus was quiet for a long time. "Dad," he finally said, "I understand now why you never got rich. Oh. You were too busy making other people's lives better to focus on making yourself wealthy. And you know what? That was the right choice. Marcus, there's nothing wrong with wanting financial security. No, but there's something wrong with wanting it more than you want to be a good person. And I spent years wanting the wrong things for the wrong reasons. But you found your way back. We found our way back. All of us together. As I finish telling you this story, it's been exactly 2 years since Marcus first mocked me for being old, since he suggested I was showing signs of cognitive decline, since he made me feel like a burden in my own home. 2 years since I wondered if I'd failed as a father, if all my sacrifices had been for nothing. Today, Marcus is 29 years old and the co-director of a construction company that employs 23 people and has completed over 100 community service projects. He makes less money than many of his business school classmates, but he sleeps better at night than he did when he was chasing millions. Danny is 27 and has become not just a successful businessman but also one of the most respected teachers in our district. He's using his inheritance to fund educational programs that teach practical life skills alongside academic subjects, helping young people build both knowledge and character. And me? I'm 66 now, officially elderly by anyone's definition. But I've never felt more valuable, more respected, or more essential to the people around me. My age, which Marcus once saw as a liability, has become an asset. My experience, which he once dismissed as outdated, has become the foundation for everything we're building together. But this story isn't really about money, inheritance, or even family reconciliation. It's about something deeper and more universal, the truth that respect is a choice, that character is built through daily decisions, and that the way we treat the people who can't benefit us reveals who we really are. I've learned that you can't force someone to value you, but you can choose to stop accepting disrespect. You can't control how others see your contributions, but you can control whether you continue making them with dignity and purpose. Most importantly, I've learned that love without respect is just sentiment, and that real family bonds are built through consistent choices to honor, support, and care for each other. Marcus learned that success without character is just sophisticated failure, that intelligence without wisdom is just educated foolishness, and that true strength comes from lifting others up rather than putting them down. Danny learned that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the opportunity to prove they can change, and that real wealth comes from using your resources to build something bigger than yourself. And Margaret, wise, observant Margaret, who watched our family for decades, taught us all that the best inheritance anyone can leave is not money, but the example of how to live with integrity, compassion, and genuine care for others. The rocking chair that started this whole journey still sits in my living room. Marcus asked me to teach him how to restore furniture, and we've worked on several pieces together. Last month, he finished his first solo project, a beautiful dining table that he built for the Santos family, the same family whose house he'd helped construct. "Dad," he said as we delivered the table, "I finally understand why you love this work. It's not just about building things. It's about building relationships, building community, building a legacy that's bigger than yourself." And how does that feel? Like I'm finally growing up. But the story doesn't end there, because the best stories never really end, they just evolve into new chapters. Last week, Marcus came to me with news that both surprised and delighted me. "Dad, I got a call from Frank's daughter. You remember Frank, the janitor I told you about from California?" "Of course. She found my contact information in his belongings." Apparently, he'd been following our story through news articles about the affordable housing project. He'd saved every article, every photo, every mention of Margaret's legacy construction. Why? Marcus pulled out a letter, handwritten in shaky script. He wrote her a letter before he died. He told her about meeting me, about the conversation we had, about how he hoped I'd find my way back to my family. What did the letter say? That watching someone young learn to value wisdom over cleverness gave him hope for the future. That knowing his words had helped someone find their way back to respect and humility made his last years feel meaningful. Marcus looked up at me with tears in his eyes. "Dad, he died feeling proud that he'd made a difference in someone's life. A janitor that everyone ignored helped change the direction of our entire family." Frank sounds like he was a wise man. He was. And you know what? His daughter wants to move here. She's a nurse, and she's heard about our community programs. She wants to be part of something that honors her father's memory. And so our family continues to grow, not through blood or marriage, but through shared values and mutual respect. Frank's daughter, Jenny, moved to our town last month and has already become integral to our community health initiatives. Circle after circle, ripple after ripple, one act of kindness inspiring another, one choice to respect and value others creating waves that touch lives we'll never know about. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, thank you. Thank you for listening to an old man share the most difficult and ultimately most rewarding experience of his life. But before I let you go, I want to share some thoughts that might help you in your own life, your own relationships, your own choices about how to treat the people around you. First, if you're a young person watching this, please understand that the older people in your life, your parents, grandparents, teachers, mentors, they're not obstacles to your success. They're libraries of experience, wisdom, and love that you can access simply by showing respect and genuine interest in their perspectives. You don't have to agree with everything they say, but you can honor their journey and learn from their mistakes and victories. Second, if you're a parent like I was, struggling with a child who seems to have lost their way, remember that you can't love someone into respecting you. You can model respect, you can maintain your own dignity, and you can keep the door open for their return. But you can't sacrifice your own well-being trying to save someone who doesn't want to be saved. Third, if you're someone who's been dismissive of others because of their age, education, social status, or approach to life, it's never too late to change. Humility is a choice you can make today, right now, regardless of your past behavior. The people you've hurt may not immediately forgive you, but genuine change always creates new possibilities. And finally, if you're feeling like the world has moved on without you, like your experience and wisdom don't matter in modern times, please know that you're wrong. Character never goes out of style. Kindness never becomes obsolete. Respect never loses its value. The story I've shared with you today is really about the truth that family, real family, is built through daily choices to honor, support, and care for each other. It's about the understanding that success without character is empty, that wealth without wisdom is meaningless, and that the greatest inheritance anyone can leave is the example of how to live with integrity. Marcus and I are closer now than we've ever been. Not because money brought us together, but because loss taught him humility and humility opened his heart to the love that had always been there waiting. Danny continues to be the kind of person who makes everyone around him better simply by being himself, generous, respectful, genuinely caring about others' well-being. And Margaret's plan, her long-term vision for how money could be used to teach lessons and build character, continues to unfold in ways that amaze me every day. The businesses we've built, the relationships we've restored, the community we've served, all of it traces back to one woman's understanding that true wealth is measured not in dollars, but in the positive impact you have on others. Tomorrow, Marcus and I start work on our biggest project yet, a community center for at-risk youth, funded by a grant we received because of our track record of putting people before profits. Danny will be running educational programs there, teaching young people about both academic subjects and life skills. It's work that will never make us rich, but it's work that makes us proud. Work that honors the memory of Sarah and Margaret and Frank and everyone who taught us that the measure of a life is not what you accumulate, but what you give. So to everyone watching this, wherever you are in the world, whatever challenges you're facing in your own families and relationships, remember this: it's never too late to choose respect over pride, character over convenience, love over selfishness. The people in your life who love you, who've sacrificed for you, who've tried to teach you valuable lessons, they won't be here forever. Don't wait until you've lost them to appreciate what they've given you. And if you've made mistakes, if you've hurt people you love, if you've let pride and ambition make you forget your values, you can choose differently starting right now. Today. This moment. Because the most beautiful thing about human beings is our capacity to change, to grow, to become better than we were yesterday. And sometimes, losing everything we thought we wanted is exactly what we need to find everything we actually need. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for letting an old man share the lessons that have shaped his life and his understanding of what really matters. Before you go, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel if this story resonated with you. Share it with someone who might need to hear these lessons about family, respect, and the choices that define our character. Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I read every single comment and love connecting with people from all over the world who are working to build better relationships and stronger families. And remember, wherever you are, whatever you're facing, whatever mistakes you've made or challenges you're confronting, you have the power to choose respect, kindness, and genuine care for others. You have the power to build something beautiful with your life, starting today. Thank you for being part of this community. Thank you for believing that stories like this matter, that character matters, that the way we treat each other matters. Until next time, this is James, reminding you that the greatest inheritance we can leave is not what we accumulate, but who we choose to become and how we choose to treat the people we love. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next story.